Well, thank you to everyone for being here with us. We're really excited to be doing this event with Nespresso and our very talented panel. I'm Ryan Waddoups. I'm the senior editor of Surface Magazine, and today we are joined by Loris Gréaud.
Exactly, Loris Gréaud.
Great. And Lonneke Gordijn.
Hello.
Studio Drift. And today we're going to be talking about the power of art and design in the fight against climate change and environmental degradation, which is a very loaded topic. We could probably talk about this for hours, but I think we're going to try to keep things fairly concise today. I'm going to start things off with a fairly big question, but one that's quite important. Obviously, climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our generation, and there's no real one-size-fits-all approach to, tackling this major issue. So I wanted to ask our panelists, what do you think is the role of the artist in combating climate change and furthering these conversations?
Well, I can only speak for myself, what I think my role should be. And I think that's for every artist also different, because I think the artistic approach doesn't always necessarily have to contain climate change. But I think it's also a situation we can't ignore. And I think most artists, as well as we do, react to what's happening around us and what we actually sense and what we feel. And in my opinion, I want to make people feel what it means to be connected to your environment, what it means to be connected to other people around you, and how you can create situations that you, within that connection, actually can come to agreements. I think the most important moments when we feel happiness, but also belonging, or we have a big clarity of mind, is when we are completely aligned with our environment. And nature is doing that almost naturally for us, A few days ago we did this really nice morning swim here in the sea. And all this stress and also a lot of fun here at this fair. But then you're in the sea and you go on these waves and then you start to completely relax. Because these are movements that are very close to us. And I think these are moments that you feel that connection. But very often during the day and when we're busy, when we're mainly in our mind, in our head, with our thoughts, we don't feel that connection. And that's why we don't respond, because I think we are meant to respond to change. And we respond to change in maybe our professional life or our private life, but not in our life on this earth. It seems like we don't even have that role anymore. So I think that is, in my opinion, my most important mission, to create installations and situations where people can feel that connection and then learn from that, and also learn how to establish those connections, because we can actually access them quite easily.
And Loris, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, the thing is, I'm trying to do poetry to resonate with what you're just saying and your statement. And I think poetry communicate before it's understood. So we're not talking about communication. On my level, I work as an ambassador for this foundation and this professor called Michel André. It's called the Sense of Silence Foundation. And now the studio is working in synergy with the Sense of Silence Foundation. And Professor Michel André is really trying to save mankind and changing things. I'm not doing this at all. On my level, I'm helping and bringing energy to the Sense of Silence Foundation. And also, Lonneke, to just make a prolongation of your reflection, it's one of Michel André's thought and the mission of the Sense of Silence Foundation. Michel André think that we just separate ourselves. We're talking about human and nature, and we sort of separate ourselves when we start formulating, when we add the language, and we just forget how to listen to the world. Like this is the common thing that we are sharing in this world is the sound, the frequency, below sea level, in the air, everywhere. And what Michel André is doing is monitoring the world, and his statement is listening to the world to heal it. I can develop on this, but this is my answer.
Well, do you mind explaining a little bit more about what you mean and what the work of the Sense of Silence Foundation is doing?
Yes, absolutely. So to develop this idea, just like really a straight example. For example, the Sense of Silence Foundation have started with Michel André have been called for a very specific problem in the Caribbean. Some boats were hitting whale and sperm whale. Something had to be done. Michel André placed some hydrophone, passive hydrophone, in the Caribbean under sea level, in a way that he could warn the whale about the boat coming, and also warn the pilot of the boat that there is a whale there. A similar thing happened in India with elephants. Elephants were crossing a railroad and get hit by train. So he had to monitor this and warn the elephant and warn the train driver. And for the past 30 years, he put microphone, hedophone in all over the world, in a way that from the lab, and I was there at Villanova 1 hour from Barcelona about a month ago, he put some microphone in the most secluded spaces and places in the world to be able to listen to it. Then suddenly, from this mission in Amazonia, he realized that he could warn and locate when people are cutting trees from the Amazonia, because he has his ears everywhere in the world, and he's listening to the language of the world. He's listening to the sound of the world to heal it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's beautiful.
That's what it's doing.
And so to accomplish that, you're using very advanced technologies. These are bioacoustic sensors that you're deploying essentially in nature in order to protect endangered wildlife. Can you talk a little bit about, both of you, can you talk a little bit about how, you use technology in your practice and where that conversation is going for you?
Well, if I can, what you just said, and then what your question was actually something that just came to my mind, or what actually technology is. I mean, humans always use technology to see, basically. I mean, science is understanding this world, right? But then it's always only one thing pointed out, and then we forget maybe of how everything is interconnected. But I think technology to see and to listen and to hear is the most important thing for us to see this world. And I think we can also see it with our own technology, with our own eyes and nose and senses. We're made for that. I think learning how to tap into that better and to use our senses better, I think would be very useful, because then we can also listen without the technology. But yeah, I think technology has always helped mankind to understand the world. And then we shouldn't forget about the world if we want to understand this, right? Because it's about this world. It's not about all these technologies in the end. And I think it looks like we have made that switch that suddenly it's about the technology and not anymore about why the technology was invented. What actually did we want to achieve? Where were we heading to? Are we heading to better understanding, or are we heading to selling technology for the sake of something that seems to improve us but not really does? So I think as long as it's for improvement of our situation in this world and our understanding of it, I think technology is the best use. And in my practice at Studio Drift, I didn't study technology or anything, but we very early on we understood that we wanted to understand life and recreate life and understand at what moments we felt that connection with an object, for instance. I mean, in our background, we created objects in the beginning, and I always found these exhibitions very dead, with all these objects, and I didn't really. Yeah, it's a beautiful object, and then you move on. So when does it really start to come alive? So one day we created an object. It was a shylight, which was moving up and down, and I wanted to create something that had multiple moments of being. Like in nature, everything is always transforming, and it has so many different moments. Like we very often use plants and flowers as decoration, right? I mean, also in our landscape, it's decoration. But there's so much emotion in a flower. For instance, when it just opens, it's very shy, and then it blooms. It gets a bit more confidence and starts to bloom a bit more, and then it's almost dying, and it needs to bloom even more because it needs to attract all these bees. There's so much change, and then it decays, and then there's a new one popping up. It's like constant movement, and it's endlessly interesting to watch that and to learn that and understand it, because there's so many deeper layers in it, and it's the same layers that are in us, and important for ourselves to understand ourselves. So I think we started to use technology to recreate that, or to learn how that works. And with every work we made in the last 15 years, I understood more about nature while using technology, and understanding that technology is only a tool to get closer to nature. And in the end, nature always wins, because it's always much better and more complex, but more profound. So I see it for myself as a process of learning and understanding how this world works and what I need to learn from it in order to be able to communicate it. And that communication goes not through words, but through the work and through being in the work and tapping into these feelings that we have that come naturally to us when we interact with surroundings and the natural world, and understand better how we react to it and when we start reacting to it. So, for example, we created, it sounds really weird maybe, but a floating block of concrete. And the moment you put that block of concrete on the ground, it's a block of concrete, and let's all these blocks of concrete, we just notice it, think, oh, beautiful, and we walk past. But when do you actually start to feel an emotional connection to that block of concrete? I mean, if you can create an emotional connection to anything, then you actually are a step further in our evolution, I think. So if you look at this building, for instance, what should this building do before it really gives us an emotional response? Well, what we saw with that floating block of concrete, the moment that the concrete started floating and behaving in a certain way, it became something that we could relate to, even that it was a block of concrete, but it was behaving, it was moving, it was curious, it started to wander off and become something else. And I think since I understood that I felt friendship for a block of concrete at some point, which is completely ridiculous if you think about it, I started to become very interested in movement and certain type of movements that make us transform and change our mind. Sorry, it was not really the answer to your question.
No, that was great. I mean, movement informs one of your installations that's actually on view in Miami right now at Superblue, called Meadow. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a series of floating flowers at Superblue that mimics the process. It has a name, and I'm not going to try to say the name, but but the process of flowers opening and closing in response to sunlight.
Yeah, that's one of the movements, but it's actually more about how they behave as a group and how they respond to the environment and how people respond to it. So it's about that connection between the visitor and those movements. And in nature, like a tree is not an individual. We always think like everything is an individual because we perceive ourselves as individuals. But for instance, a tree is a colony. It's a group of individuals that all work together. And personally, I believe our body is also a colony of different functions that all communicate and work together. And so the meadow installation at Superblue is a colony responding to each other, responding to the environment, and in that way creating I think, an atmosphere and frequencies in that room that are very easy for us to tap into. So they're very close to our natural biorhythms, our breath, our heartbeats, and that makes you calm down and become very present in the moment. And when you that happens to yourself, but also maybe to your neighbor or to someone you don't know, but who's also in that space, suddenly it feels much easier to speak to that person because you're in the same moment, you feel the same. You're not on your phone with another 20,000 conversations going on. And this creates situations where you can actually build bridges, find solutions, and learn how to use those rhythms to actually connect. And from that point of being, sorry for my Dutch English. I think from that state of mind, we have to learn to be in the right state of mind to make decisions that matter. I think that is the most important thing, to get to that state of mind, to understand how to get there. And we're trying to achieve that with that installation.
So I guess my next question is, how do you think we can get there? You know.
To me? The question? Yeah.
You. Yeah, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think to get there is to create awareness, to not only rationalize everything or calculate everything, but to really also add the part of intuition and I wouldn't say emotion, but intuition and this deeper understanding of this planet that we actually all have, but we only use it when we're put out in a situation that we have to survive. And then suddenly we feel everything, and we can also kind of almost understand when it starts to rain and everything starts to work again in our body, that this response to the environment is there. So I think we have to learn again who we are and what our role is, and our role especially in connection to the planet, which is very small.
To talk more specifically about the art itself, and again in extension of your statement, we have to have, not talking about the planet, but about ourselves. We have to be aware that we are working and producing the very last space of freedom, meaning in a museum, in front of a work of art, you have a conscience that suddenly you're not into any kind of authoritarian interaction. You decide your own time, you decide your own displacement, you decide what you project on it. And to have this conscience and this great luck to be able to experience art. And thanks for your work, because it's a really good illustration, because what you're doing is really inclusive, meaning that it could talk to everybody, the spectrum of people that could experience and have feelings and have emotion. It's multi-layer, and it's great for this purpose. So once again, just to say it to come back to the art, to have this full knowledge that we are talking about the last space of freedom.
Yeah, and, I've been paying pretty close attention to, these types of experiential artworks that, comment on the climate crisis. And instead of drilling hard facts into your brain, they leave you with a certain feeling, and they kind of let you look inward as to how you can improve. Like, once you walk away from having experienced the art, you can think about how, you personally can improve. It leaves you with the feeling that might galvanize change down the line, maybe not immediately, but it gets you thinking and contemplating. So I kind of want to ask both of you, how can artists themselves improve? How can the art industry improve, on a day-to-day basis, and being more sustainable and embracing more eco-friendly practices?
Well, so talking about myself, what I do is, again, work in synergy with this foundation. And the purpose, what Michel André is doing in life is trying to save the planet. I'm not doing this. I'm producing art and poetry, which is already a sort of, again, and talk only for myself, it's a huge responsibility to be irresponsible. I have to be responsible to be able to produce art. But at the same time, I can work in synergy and give some energy to the studio. And if I use the word synergy, is not anodin. Now I'm doing French English, because synergy is a word invented by Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller have been spending half of his life traveling all around the world to talk about this idea of spaceship Earth, about this idea of ecology, before we name it ecology, about global thinking. And 90 years ago, he told us that we were doomed and that we should invent what he called the world game, the idea that we have to use globally our own resources. The Earth as a spaceship traveling, we have to. So to talk today, right here, right now, about this idea, it's kind of obsolete, like we are doomed. If I can give energy to Professor Michel André, because I know what he's doing, I'm doing it. And that's what I will do tomorrow. So this was my position about this. But I'm not going to save the world.
But collectively, we might be able to. Maybe. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's such a hard question, a confronting question, because I think everyone can do more. Especially reflecting on this this week, and I'm being very critical, also to myself. What everyone can do is do less and better. And I think as artists, anyway, the work that you make should be extremely true to yourself and to what you want to achieve. And I think brands who want to facilitate artworks should completely facilitate the vision of the artist instead of trying to push other ideas. I think that is something where it can become quite powerful. And I think as an artist, you can demand to use certain materials, to use certain ways of shipping, or to say we're not going to ship anything, we're going to make something that is not physical. Maybe we are not all traveling here, maybe we do it in a different way. And I know we all also need that connection, and we want to see each other, and we want to be engaged. But I think it's definitely our role to say no to certain things, say, hey, I would love to work with you, but only when we do it this way. And just planting a couple of trees is not enough. And I'm completely guilty to that as well. Because we just yesterday sold an NFT for which we replant, I think, 72 acres of trees. But I also know that an ecosystem isn't built overnight. You didn't do your duty because you planted a couple of trees which are maybe this big, and maybe half of them don't survive. I mean, a forest is an ecosystem that grows over years, and that consists of many different plants that all function together. Yeah, I think there's so many things we can do. I'm very happy to see, also to hear the dollar for each coffee. I think these are really great starting points. It communicates an awareness and almost a guilt that we have to do something. I think we're still in the I don't know what to do, let's donate money, I feel guilty state of mind. But I guess we have to go to the next phase, which is very hard, and I also don't know exactly what it is going to be. But to act differently, not only say, not only pay it off, but really demand for it and almost, not almost, really create this new reality together. And then find a way, because it all sounds like not fun, but of course it can be fun. Everything can be fun. So let's try to find that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think over the past year and a half, we've had to confront that reality with the pandemic being, quarantined in our own homes. We suddenly had to embrace Zoom and remote collaboration, and then we saw our carbon footprint go way down because we were traveling less. Maybe, of course, that was canceled out with the rise of NFTs and blockchains and whatnot, but...
or crypto.
Crypto, yeah. And so, I mean, my final question was going to be, what is the next frontier? But do we know? Like, how can artists take things one step further? You know, instead of simply, you know, planting some trees or giving back. Like, what are some ideas that both of you have that the industry can start adopting?
I would love to bounce this question back to the whole industry around the artist, because I think of all the people that are here, not even 1% is an artist, and all the questions are to the artist. But I think it's really definitely those fairs are extremely high in carbon footprint. So I think it's also a bounce back to the industry. I think the artists can bounce it back, but I would love to hear answers also from the industry, because we have to focus on the work and creating this new vision and engaging people with this new vision. And I think then all these other people around here should also be responsible and power those solutions, but also be responsible for their part.
Yeah, sort of doing less, giving the opportunity to, again, from a very pragmatic point of view, we need less art and more very good art. We need more good art. That's a step further. More good art.
Less noise, if you will. Quality over quantity. Great. Well, that just about wraps up everything that I wanted to ask. I guess I'll turn the mic over to both of you if you have any final thoughts on this topic that you wanted to air. Otherwise,
I think we said a lot. Oh, you have a question? Yeah.
A lot of your work is revolves around designing like nature, like you said. That's what you guys have been doing for a long time now. I'm curious what your thoughts are on using if one of the solutions can be biophilic design. Like, do we need to be more designing like nature, mimicking nature, looking for things, solution in nature to help kind of maybe solve our waste crisis, our energy crisis? I use the example of hexagonal design that mimics beehives, and they've it's the strongest pattern, I guess, in the natural world, and people have been experimenting with that in different ways. But I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's not in the objects around us that we design. I think it's in ourself, in how we move and how we behave. So I think since we already have all these beautiful things around us, I don't think we need to design anything else. A chair, to now throw all these chairs away and replace them for a biodegradable chair doesn't leave us with a smaller footprint, right? It just then it's again a communication. Look, I'm doing something right. So what should we do? Yeah, I have some ideas, but they're maybe a bit radical. I don't know if this is the moment to discuss them. I think we should be forbidden to take any new material out of the earth for the next 10, 20 years and use everything we have and think about what is there, because we have to work from transformation of what is there. It's really amazing, and I love to start from scratch, especially as an artist, and I can also imagine architects. It's always wonderful to wipe everything out and then start thinking what it should be. But that's not the reality. The reality is what we have, and we have to work with what we have. And maybe also make things last longer, because it's not constantly about new. I think we have to think about, not even think, I think we just have to stop shouting and thinking that we have to communicate everything new constantly in order to get new followers and more attention, because but yeah, that we're not there yet. I think we're still in that wave of using the social medias to attract attention, and that with that the power is shifting, and maybe that brings the power back to the people that are all those followers who will demand for something else. So I don't know exactly the answer, but I think it's not continuing close to this way and just replacing some things in this world. I wish I had all the answers as well. I really.
Don't we all? Great.
Thank you for the question.
It's a great question. Yeah, well, I think that just about wraps things up. So I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. And to everyone who turned out today.